Hotep, brothers and sisters.
Back with you again. Part two of what do we tell our children. And I want to discuss the things that we will tell them in terms of our terms of spirituality. First of all, you have to let them know that they are a spirit having a human experience. And when I say human, you know, hue, man, color, man. Hue means color. A spirit having a human experience here in this dimension to understand self, to understand the God within, to get on the God frequency. And the way that that is demonstrated is that your thoughts and actions have to be not only in accordance with divine order, at the same time you have to generate that strength. It's a lot of strength that goes with that divine order. Meaning, being spiritual, you don't teach them that being spiritual means to turn the other cheek and let somebody smack your ass around into a new day. It means standing up. Because a lot of times when you're dealing with adverse energies and vibrations, you have to really be on some warrior killer shit just to survive. And this is where we fall short in instructing the next generation. Because, for example, if we tell them, if we start sending them to church, send them to the mosque, send them to the temple, we expect for them to not engage in any type of physical altercations, to be able to talk their way through some of the most hideous situations and conditions known to man. And this is how they ended up consumed. For example, if you know, and I teach anyone this, doesn't have to be the next generation, it could be this generation. If you know you've been stopped and fucked with by a dirty, white, no good, white imperialism type motherfucking devil ass pig, and that you know your life will end today on the account of this motherfucking devil. If in your heart you so desire that you want to see the next sun come up, you'll do whatever it takes, even if it boils down to the fight and tussle over his motherfucking service weapon. And you have a lot of adverse energies out here. Particularly, let me explain this to you. And this is what I tell the babies. The most whites are raised to believe that blacks are just rapping, ball playing, drug selling niggas that mean no good. They talk a lot of shit with big penises. And that you need to stay away from them. Most of them look at you as such. And you all know that. Have you ever seen a cracker, a little white kid between the ages of 8 and 15 that looks at you and stares at you to no end? And you can see the fear in their eyes because they see you as a rapper or a basketball player or the names I just mentioned. And so they teach their babies that. What we have to teach our babies is how to stand up and be counted. You're going to always be stereotyped. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. But you got to learn how to stereotype back. You know, if I'm a rapping nigga, you are a stinking motherfucking cracker. It's just that simple. You all are cavemen, savage motherfuckers that come from the Caucasus Mountains in Europe, that you were on all fours eating juniper root, and then even the Dark Ages in Europe, where we had to come, my ancestors had to come and attempt to civilize you motherfuckers because of all the diseases that you were plagued with, that these so-called scriptures talked about, leprosy and chicken pox and measles and all of this shit. And that the chosen and original people made an attempt to try to civilize you and to get you to think on a humanitarian level. But since you come out of the caves as a savage, you think like a savage, you eat like a savage, you fuck like a savage. And this is why you go around the country, because there's no place on this country, there's no ink spot on this country that you motherfucking savages haven't been where you've destroyed and created pure fucking havoc, because you have a savage nature. And the only way to deal with you and combat that savage nature is to get down and get savage with you motherfuckers. And so once our babies are taught these things and they understand and know these things, the less they will have to worry about being attacked verbally. Because see, these crackers can get real intellectual on you and try to use words to pretend that they are so intelligent, in which they're not. The black man is the most intelligent person on the planet, the black man and black woman. Simply because the black man and black woman gave every other race, every other color permission to exist. And this is something that they do not want to accept, that they come from us. And it shows in their behavior, because we're the ones that they try to keep down and try to eliminate and annihilate. Because if they can get rid of us, then they can claim every invention. They can claim everything that's in the existence of this planet. You remember when I told you all that if we're not careful, 200 years from now, they're going to be saying Tupac was white. So, we have to really teach these babies these things. It is not teaching them to hate. It's teaching them to understand. And so, crackers will say that's, teaching them to hate. No. See, that's just, you want them to be passive and forget about what their ancestors went through. And you teach them the history of your ancestors to make them appear that your ancestors were these righteous, no-lie telling founding fathers, when they were the founding fathers which enslaved our ancestors. And then you're parlaying and you've usurped the wealth that our ancestors' blood, sweat, and tears produced in this land, on this land. And you don't want to discuss that. So when you run into an individual of color that has complete knowledge of self, you bow down to your lowest form and respect him to the utmost, because he can see straight through you. and has a whole knowledge of your fucking existence because you just got here 6,000 years ago. You just got here. And with that savage behavior, you have rapidly destroyed and fucked over and killed and murdered so millions and billions and trillions of people on the planet of color. And so that's why it's important to teach the babies the history and the herstory. Now, the economics. Simply have to teach our babies not to buy the shit that they want you to buy. Take a holistic form in your diet. Do not buy the Coons, Michael Jordans. Do not support motherfuckers like that. Take a budget. Because you can take a $25 pair of tennis shoes, and if you hook it up right, keep them fresh and clean, you can start a trend which will save billions of dollars in the black community. Because I've seen a lot of Jordans that was simply fucking ugly, that people were still getting them just because they were Jordans, just because they were in the stores and they were the newest Jordans. But some of them are just as fucked up and ugly as hell. And then you have And1s, you have all types of Adidas, you have all types of other shoes, Skechers, that are just as durable and just as attractive as some fucking Jordans. So you teach them, you know, the importance of economics, the importance of sacrifice. Why would you spend $200 on an outfit out your paycheck when you can go to a store and save?
Want to keep playing music with your screen on?
If you save $300 or $400, you can buy 3 or 4 outfits.
Looking hard but won't realize that they will never see.
In other words, a lot of you will take $200 out your $500 or $600 Wendy's paycheck and buy an outfit to go out with, when you can save 3 or 4 checks and then spend $800 and get you 5 or 6 outfits, and then you don't have to go back again and buy anything for a while. And that's for someone who is you know, that takes a lot of pride and because fashion can become a religion to some people, where they don't feel right unless they all draped up from head to toe. And that has a lot to do with self-esteem. That has a lot to do with how you feel inside. Because a lot of people, some of the most brokest people on the planet, dress like they have a lot of money. And that's how you know they don't have anything, because they're trying to make you think that they have a little something. It's all a goddamn game. And you have to we have to teach our babies this game. How to play it properly. How to make that sacrifice. Just be a plain brother with equity, with capital. And so you're putting away, so when you meet that person to claim as your queen, as your king, you will have the capital to have the proper wedding, have the proper ceremony, have the proper honeymoon, have the proper money for the down payment on the home, and begin the process of living, and at the same time building a nest egg for the next generation that you have created. Real important, very important, because most of us came, like I said, came on this planet, came here with nothing. Our people had nothing to leave us behind. Some were fortunate enough to have the grandmothers had a home or some farmland down in the south and things of that nature. But for the most part, the majority of black people came into this world with nothing because the last generation did everything they could to provide and survive. And so I don't fault them at all because I'm very grateful for them because they went all out to ensure that we were able to try to get something on our own for the next generation. You know, it's complicated, but at the same time, it's real simple. You know, now, the spirituality part, you know, whichever route that they want to choose to get and make that connection with the creator that's within them, that's cool. But they have to understand that all of these books talks about an enemy that's in the flesh. And you have to tell them who the enemy is. Because they will know eventually. But we want to tell them ahead of time so they won't be stuck and have to find out the hard way. Because we have a tendency, and I'm talking about my generation, have a tendency to over-respect whites and under-respect blacks, under-respect their own family. Because family members, in a lot of families, they're the most disrespectful to you than any cracker could ever be. Because based on self-hatred, most family members resemble anything that resembles them. So a sibling is more close to you in terms of features than anybody on the planet. So if you hate yourself, you're definitely going to have hatred for that individual. And so that's why you hear they say family is the worst enemy. In a lot of ways it is. How can that be? How can that change? How can that change? Simply by teaching knowledge of self, which is something that we weren't taught. This generation was not taught that. As a matter of fact, this generation had to deal with the spilling of bloodshed of the leaders, the true leaders that were sent to teach us who we were. In other words, just say if you was born in 63, in the 60s, or even in the 50s, you primarily as a child had to deal with the loss of Malcolm, Martin, Medgar, Fred Hampton, Huey, and the likes. And so, and the people before that, the generation before that, didn't pay enough attention to those leaders to stand all the way up because they were not here long enough for the things that they stood on and their foundations to jail in the minds of our peoples. And so we were dealing with we grew up with the residue of that. And so later on in the 80s and 90s, we began to have, Khalid Muhammad, Farrakhan, Tupac, and others. Sister Soldier, Public Enemy, and the movie Malcolm X by Spike Lee. And so that was just scratching the surface in terms of the knowledge base. And so now that a lot of us had to fight for black consciousness, And I'll tell you, I've read hundreds and hundreds of books, because before DVDs were out, before the luxury of YouTube and all these other toys were available, you had to actually read. You had to actually buy books. You had to actually buy a VHS tape and watch it over and over and over again, because the scholars were limited then. Phil Valentine, Booker T. Coleman, Dale Jones, Bobby Hemming, and a few others, Dr. Welsing, Queen of Fool, and others. So the scholarship was limited. And so by the turn of the century, they stepped in elderhood. The torch was passed to a whole bunch of young brothers and sisters. And then the confusion kicked in, because people began to think that leadership was about being on top of everybody else and not walking among other leaders side by side. And so this is when you had so much confusion, with the assistance of intelligence, the FBI, CIA, and other nigger agents, to disrupt and diffuse the fire in the hearts and minds of our potential soldiers and leaders in the black community. And so now we're starting all over again. This is another cycle. This cycle is much more stronger. But at the same time, you still have those particular nigger agents and what have you. However, it has become more sturdier, because you have elders that are warriors, and you have elders that are revolutionaries. You have consciousness from 2 and 3 year olds all the way up to 80s and 90s. And so the once the black consciousness is engraved in the hearts and minds of the next generation, that these other things have to be implemented, because without economics you cannot fight. It costs money to battle, to have a war. You have to have economics. You have to have capital. You have to have commerce. You have to have adequate resources for food, for clothing, for shelter, for weapons, for intelligence. And so when you meet brothers with that mindset, like myself and others, these are brothers and sisters that are targeted for termination. And so it's important. That's why sometimes I may scramble when I talk about a particular subject, because I'm trying to get cram as much information, history, spirituality, economics as I possibly can in the minds and hearts of the next generation. Because time is running out for a lot of us. Because no one knows when that last day is coming. And I also want to give a special shout out to an elder that lives across the street from me, Elder Miss Wright, who took ill this morning, and hopefully she's regained consciousness, and hopefully she's okay, or that she's going to be okay. You know, we pray and we ask the Creator and the ancestors to embrace her, because you make the final decision. The Creator and the ancestors make these final decisions. And so I hope that I have been somewhat informative to you all. But I'm going to do another video as we go along, you know, as I get more and more engulfed into the economics and the art of war in terms of how to battle the system of racism, white supremacy. You know, how to, in a state of emergency, how do we take care of our elders? Where do we take them at? You know, vacant schools, vacant buildings. How do we access running water? How do we know if something's contaminated? Because with a nuclear drop, everything becomes contaminated. You know, how to deal with situations like that. Flashlights, water, transportation. When they start blocking all the highways, kicking people's doors in to make sure they're not in their homes. Putting them on FEMA trucks, taking them to FEMA camps. Because once you're there, you're never returning. You're never coming out of there alive as well. So we're going to get into that. We're going to get into that. You know, I just try to share as much information as I can. But, you know, after about half hour or so, these camera lights, you know, kind of blind me. So sometimes I'll look down or have my eyes closed because the camera lights are very, very powerful. That's why I understand how, you know, our brothers and sisters feel when they're constantly on television or constantly being interviewed because of the bright lights. But nevertheless, brothers and sisters, as always, you know, I leave you all with the two famous words. Hotep, three famous words, excuse me. Hotep, Black Power.